the Faustian idea, the bargain with the devil, starts to creep in. You could think of John Doe as fate, but there's another figure that he could possibly represent, and that is the Luciferian figure.
You've made quite a life for yourself, Detective.
California, stay away from here. Stay away from here now. Don't come in here. Whatever you hear, stay away. John Doe has the upper hand. Mills!
Hi, welcome to Justin's Morning Coffee. Okay, so it's time for the next lecture in the 7 Basic Plots lecture series. So far we've covered Rags to Riches, Overcoming the Monster of Origin, Return, and Quest. Today I want to talk about tragedy. As a review, linked below, I've got my overview of all 7 of the 7 basic plots, as well as lectures on individual lectures, several on Rags to Riches, Overcoming the Monster, and Voyage and Return, as well as Quest. As review, I plot these out on the 2-mountain system. I see this as a whole life cycle. Rags to Riches, Overcoming the Monster, Voyage and Return, and Comedy are moving up the first mountain, the first half of life, the mountain of success. And then Tragedy, Quest, and Rebirth are navigating your way to the second mountain, the second half of life, which is the mountain of legacy. So you can think of success as taking in. The mountain of success is learning how to lead, learning leadership, competence, gathering wealth and resources, wisdom and knowledge, and finding your place in the world and your role in society and your other half. That's all in the mountain of success. And then the mountain of legacy is like if the first mountain is breathing in, the second mountain is breathing out. And that's now taking everything that you got and giving it back to society and giving it to the next generation so that this whole cycle can start over again. So how does tragedy relate to this whole cycle? It's essentially the other half of comedy. I'm going to cover comedy later because that's a really massive undertaking. Tragedy is the tumbling down sort of off this mountain of success. You could think of it as tragedy are those who would never make it to the mountain of legacy. You could think of it that way. They die down here in the Quest Valley. Or if there's a little mini tragedy in their life, then that'll be a midlife crisis, and that will require a quest story to get them to this mountain of legacy, something like that. But let's dig into the plot type here. Now, Christopher Booker talks about the tragic archetype as Faustian. That's the style of tragedy that he talks about in the book. Now, what I noticed in all of my research here, and this is why it takes me so long, is that there was another set of tragedies that really didn't fit into that Faustian category at first. It seemed as though this was a distinct story, and I'm calling that the Oedipus Rex style tragedy. I don't want to call it Oedipal because that's too Freudian, and that relates to a whole nother set of questions that don't necessarily relate to this plot type. So I'm calling it Oedipus Rex style tragedy versus the Faustian style. Okay, so here's what Booker says about tragedy, and this is going to fit into the Faustian category. The essence of tragedy: the hero or heroine commits some great offense and is drawn down step by step into paying the price. So there's this sense of making some kind of transgression, leaving the path, or I like to think of it as a bargain with the devil, a Faustian bargain with the devil, which then has consequences. And those consequences are not realized by the protagonist right at first. It constitutes a blind spot for this protagonist. They think that it's going to work out, this deal with the devil. And of course, what happens in the course of the story is we realize how wrong-headed that that initial great offense, you might say, is. So he continues, this is Christopher Booker, the hero or heroine may be made up of both light and dark qualities in the beginning, but their dark side prevails, and they tend to become darker and darker while the light in the story consolates more and more around them. This is Walter White. And so this is mild-mannered Walter White. You might say the light version of Walter White versus the dark version of Walter White. Look at the difference in the clothing style, even. And so you can tell that, the makers of Breaking Bad, of course, are very familiar with this Faustian style of tragedy. So the light constitutes outside of them, while the darkness gathers inside of them. And that light, Booker says, constitutes first in their innocent victims, and finally triumphantly in those who gather in opposition to overthrow them. So you could say that in one of my interactions on Twitter the other day, someone said exactly this, that you could think of the Faustian style tragedy as an overcoming the monster story, but from the perspective of the monster. Now, in a little bit, when we explore this a little bit more, I'm going to look at a real-life example of this, which is the real-life story of Hitler. One of the reasons why, when you go to Germany, when you go to Berlin, you're going to see Hitler everywhere. Hitler, 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 Nazis, Hitler, Hitler, And I remember when I was there, we were shooting a movie there, and so we all went and on our day off, we did all the touristy things. We went to Checkpoint Charlie, and we went around, and one of my coworkers came back and said, they're obsessed with Hitler around here. He's infamous, And one of the reasons I think for that is that he actually fits that tragic archetype. The story of his life fits that tragic archetype so perfectly. So we're going to look at that later. Okay, but now, in order to understand the Faustian, I think we have to go in the order of history. So we've got the Greek style Oedipus Rex, and then we've got the Faustian. So I think we need to look at that first. And one of the reasons why it's interesting, I think, is because in the 20th century, we sort of had a rebirth or a resurgence of the Oedipus Rex style tragedy over and against the Faustian. Of course, both of them exist in the 20th century, but there has been kind of particularly the movies of the 70s have really embraced that Oedipus style tragedy. Okay, so let's look at that first. Now, this is how I'm thinking about it. There's a sense that the world, a map of the world, going back in history, always looks like this, look like a circle. This is one of the oldest maps in human history found in the Middle East. And it's a sense of here's the world that we know. Here's the world that we live in, represented by a circle. Okay, so that circle, I think, is very, very important. You'll see it all the time. This is the world that we know. This is the world that we're familiar with, and then there's a border, and then beyond that is the unknown, or maybe this is the world we live in, and we can't escape it. We can't get beyond the horizon in order to break out of this circle of known reality. So you might think of it this. The Oedipus Rex style tragedy is living inside of a closed world that is ruled over by something or someone that will not let you escape. So that could be fate, that could be gods, the gods, as in Apollo in Oedipus Rex, or it could be God with a capital G, gods with a lowercase g, fate, determinism, some sort of a force or providence maybe, or maybe a negative version of providence, an upside down providence, I don't know, something like that, that basically hems you in, and every turn you make to try to get out of that circle of the known world, you're blocked. Until finally, at the end of the story, the hero or heroine is finally left in despair. So I think that's a good way to think about it, a good metaphor for it. You can think of it this way. There's light coming down, and there's a pool of light gathering on the ground, and that's your world, the world that you live in. And it's interesting. We think of the world as it's also a circle. It's like the globe. That's the earth. That's the world that we know. But it's always been represented as a circle. The world that you live in is this habitable world that you inhabit, the world that you are familiar with. And in overcoming the monster stories, the monster is out there. But in this case, the monster is, or fate, or somebody is hemming you in, is keeping you inside that prison, you might say. And your desire is to break out of it, and you can't do it. So that's the Oedipus story. So think of it this way. Now, if you go back and watch Chinatown, I'm going to show a couple of clips from Chinatown in a minute. But John Huston's character here, he represents this all-powerful force within the world of Chinatown, the world of the movie of Chinatown. And the Jack Nicholson character is locked inside of it. And at first, these protagonists, they always think that they can get out of it. They're like, well, maybe there's a way out. Maybe it's not so determined. Maybe it's not so deterministic, right? But time and time again, they get rebuffed and rebuffed and rebuffed until they finally realize there's no way out from this guy's clutches. This guy is in control. So there's something about representing. You have to represent fate. You have to represent the gods. You have to represent determinism somehow. And one of the ways that you'll find is that it's represented with a certain figure, a certain character, or a certain set of characters. Could be society, could be the police, could be conspiracy theory, something like that. And then the plot can unfold within those constraints. Thelma and Louise is a good example. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, good example. So Oedipus here is sort of locked inside. Now, here's what we need to do. We need to familiarize ourselves with the story of Oedipus Rex so we can all get on the same page. There really hasn't been a good movie made about the straightforward Sophocles version of Oedipus Rex made. So here's a little plot summary from an academic site. So let's watch that and then we'll discuss.
Let's summarize the plot of Oedipus Rex. In the introduction to the play, it's explained that Oedipus, king of Thebes, arrived years before in the city he now rules as a stranger after the death of King Laius. He was given the crown because he saved the city from the Sphinx. During the rising action, Oedipus sends Creon, his brother-in-law, to consult Apollo about how to stop the plague. Creon reports that Oedipus must find Laius's killer and avenge his death in order to save his people from this pestilence. The chorus suggests to Oedipus that he consult the old blind prophet Tiresias, who ultimately declares Oedipus is the cause of the plague. Oedipus accuses Tiresias of plotting with Creon to seize his throne. Before leaving, Tiresias tells Oedipus that the killer is in Thebes and will become blind and will turn out to be both the son and husband of his mother. Oedipus accuses Creon of plotting against him, and the men argue until Jocasta, Oedipus's wife, intercedes. Oedipus sends Creon out of the palace without punishing him. Jocasta then tells Oedipus of a prophecy that a son of hers, with Laius, would kill his father. She and Laius pinned the child's ankles together and had a shepherd put him in the wilderness to avoid the prophecy. Laius was killed at a place where 3 roads meet, presumably by robbers. But Oedipus recognizes this place and these circumstances and asks Jocasta to send for the remaining witness of Laius's death, a slave. He also tells Jocasta about his parents in Corinth, but he's been told they're not his real parents. Years ago, he received the same prophecy, that he would marry his mother, have children with her, and kill his father. Oedipus ran away from Corinth to escape the prophecy, but on the way, he met with travelers at a crossroads, one of whom hit him. Oedipus ended up killing them all. Jocasta sends for the slave who witnessed it. The chorus sings that if the prophecy is not actually true, their religious faith is in danger of dying. A messenger arrives and says Oedipus is indeed not the real son of the people he thought were his parents. Oedipus was a gift from a shepherd who found him with his ankles bound, and that the shepherd who gave the child to the messenger to give to the couple who raised him was the very slave they have called to share what he witnessed when Laius was killed. Jocasta realizes the truth and frantically leaves. During the climax of Oedipus Rex, the shepherd is called in and, under duress, confirms the prophecy is true. Jocasta hangs herself, and Oedipus uses the brooches from her clothes to put out his eyes so he will no longer see the horror that is his life. During the falling action, Creon takes pity on Oedipus and wants to keep him at the palace, but Oedipus insists on banishment, leaving his children behind, for he now has no power over them. In the brief resolution, the chorus sings bitterly of the unhappy tale, how a powerful man has fallen and how death is the only thing that will bring happiness to mortals.
Okay, so that's a brief overview of the story of Oedipus Rex. Now, in the way that the play unfolds, it doesn't unfold in chronological order. It's done with flashbacks. But let's just untangle that right now and just do it in chronological order so we can take this plot type apart and put it on the table and kind of start to analyze the elements here. So I use the 5-act structure that Christopher Booker uses in the 7 basic plots. It applies to all seven plot types, and it's anticipation, dream, frustration, nightmare, and conclusion. Okay, and so let's see how that plays out in the Oedipus style tragedy. So the anticipation stage is a dark prophecy is proclaimed. What's the dark prophecy in Oedipus Rex? Well, Oedipus is told, or Oedipus's parents are told, that he is going to marry his mother and kill his father. Okay, and that's the dark prophecy. The dream stage is that he tries to escape that fate, and this is what you'll see in these movies. Is initially there's this sense of here's what's going to happen. You know, whoever's in charge wants this bad thing to happen. And then the hero chafes against it and says, no, I think I can get away from it. You know, I don't want that to happen. And so the dream stage is, it seems like they can escape. So they send Oedipus off to a faraway land so that he can never do this. Now, the irony, of course, is if they hadn't done that, then maybe he never would have killed his father and married his mother. But because they did that, he didn't know what he was doing when he did it. It's very similar to, and this is a rebirth plot we're going to talk about next time, Sleeping Beauty, right? Same idea, right? There's a dark prophecy proclaimed over the Sleeping Beauty by Maleficent, which says she's going to prick her finger on the spinning wheel and she's going to fall asleep before her 16th birthday. And what do? They send her away. They say, well, maybe we can get away from that prophecy. And so they send her with the fairies out into the forest, right? So the same idea here. There's this dream. The dream stage always has a sense of it's not mapping onto reality. It's mostly fantasy, you know. So there's a sense of not believing in reality, and throughout the story, and this applies to all 7 plots. It has this quality of projection as opposed to evidence. Projecting, well, maybe we can get away with this. Okay, so the frustration stage is when that projection breaks down and you realize that reality is not going to conform to your dream. It's not going to conform to your wishes, how you hope or wish it would be. Reality is not going to be that way. So reality bites back. So the frustration stage in any story is when your dream stage basically gives way to reality, to the real world. So in the frustration stage, Oedipus kills somebody, but he doesn't know that it's his father. And he marries somebody, but he doesn't know that it's his mother. Okay? So now reality, basically that prophecy is having its way with Oedipus, but he doesn't know that, right? The nightmare stage is when the realization comes in. The nightmare stage is when Oedipus basically understands that this is what he did. And that he was playing in, like he was the puppet, and there was a puppet master who was kind of pulling the strings and causing him to do what it wants him to do. And that's the nightmare. That's the dark reality. And then the conclusion is that they have to accept it. Basically, the state of not accepting in the beginning and accepting in the end. So that there's tragic resistance or despair that happens at the end of the Oedipus style tragedy. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's look at this. I think I need to help you guys understand that the figure of fate or determinism, or how this dark prophecy is going to be played out in a modern day story, can be personified by a character in the movie. And so in this case, we've got Javier Bardem in No Country for Old Men, and he flips a coin to determine people's fate, right? So you could say that he's the figure that represents the gods that we see in Oedipus Rex, right? So let's watch a clip of that.
How much?
69 cents. Maybe something else.
I don't know. Will there?
Is something wrong?
With what?
With anything.
Is that what you're asking me? Is there something wrong with anything?
Sir?
You lived here all your life?
We come out here about 4 years ago.
You married into it.
That's the way you want to put it.
I don't have some way to put it. That's the way it is. What's the most you ever lost on a coin toss?
I don't know. I couldn't say.
Call it.
Call it.
Yes.
For what?
Just call it.
Well, we need to know what we're calling it for here.
You need to call it.
I didn't put nothing up.
Yes, you did. You've been putting it up your whole life. You just didn't know it. And it's either heads or tails. And you have to say, call it.
I need to know what I stand to win.
Everything. You stand to win everything. Call it.
All right. Heads, then.
Well done. Don't put it in your pocket. It's your lucky quarter.
Where you want me to put it?
Anywhere not in your pocket. Or it'll get mixed in with the others and become just a coin. Which it is.
Okay, very interesting. So Javier Bardem here is flipping the coin to determine someone's fate, and there's all this language around, one thing leads to another. The coin arrived at that place, and now the coin is going to determine your fate. I arrived here by the same method as the coin, Javier Bardem says. And so there's a sense that the Moss character, played by Josh Brolin, he gets the money, and then Javier Bardem has this tracker, and he's following him. No matter where Moss goes, Javier Bardem is right behind him, right, pursuing him. And the fate of Moss, the character, seems to be a foregone conclusion. There's just no way he's going to escape this. Now, in No Country for Old Men, Moss is Oedipus, and Javier Bardem is the force that's keeping him locked into this determined world. So now let's watch a scene where this is kind of a scene where the character representing fate explains to Moss's wife sort of who he is and how it is that he's in control and that there is no escape from what he wants to happen.
You got no cause to hurt me.
But I gave my word to your husband.
You gave your word to my husband to kill me?
Your husband had the opportunity to save you. Instead, he used you to try to save himself.
You don't have to do this.
People always say the same thing. This is the best I can do. Call it.
I knowed you was crazy when I saw you sitting there. I knowed exactly what was in store for me.
Call it.
No, I ain't gonna call it.
Call it.
The coin don't have no say. It's just you.
I got here the same way the coin did.
Okay, so I got here the same way the coin did. It's not up to the coin, it's just you, right? There's all of this language and look, go back and watch the movie. You're going to see the Woody Harrelson character talk this way. You're going to see the Tommy Lee Jones character talk this way. It's just all over the movie. It's all about this sense of no escape. You're not in control. Something else is in control. Okay. So now let's watch a scene. This is with the Tommy Lee Jones character, Ed, stopping by to see his old buddy. This is towards the end of the movie, and it's a scene by the Coen brothers that kind of is on the nose a little bit. It's like kind of like an explanation of the theme of the movie, and so I think that's an important aspect to look at.
And back.
How many of them things you got now?
Cats? Well, it depends on what you mean by got. Some of them are half wild, some of them are just outlaws. I got to say, you're looking older.
I am older.
Got a letter from your wife. Told me you're quitting.
That man that shot you died in prison.
Yeah.
What'd you done? He'd have been released.
Nothing. Wouldn't be no point in it. Loretta tells me you're quitting. How come you're doing that?
I feel overmatched. I always figured when I got older, God would sort of come into my life somehow. And he didn't. And I don't blame him. If I was him, I'd have the same opinion of me that he does.
What you got ain't nothing new. This country's hard on people. You can't stop what's coming. It ain't all waiting on you. That's vanity.
You can't stop what's coming. This is not a human being, you might say. And of course, it's wider than just Javier Bardem, but he feels overmatched. Tommy Lee Jones feels overmatched. Again, Oedipus Rex feels overmatched. As you get into that nightmare stage, that's when the character is starting to realize that there's no escape, right? So No Country for Old Men. The country is that circle. It's the world in which this story is situated. There's no escape from that world where certain rules apply, and those rules are down. Those rules are not such that you can escape. And so, where do these characters wind up? What do they conclude after time being rebuffed from trying to escape time and time and time again? Let's watch the controversial ending of No Country for Old Men that confused a lot of people. A lot of people said, I don't understand. The main character was Moss, the guy who finds the money in the beginning, pursued by Javier Bardem, et cetera, et cetera. And this, Tommy Lee Jones is kind of a fringe character, the kind of a commentator on the state of things. He's the pessimist saying, well, to the young cop. Oftentimes there's an old cop and a young cop, and the old cop is saying to the young cop, your optimism, see, I've seen a lot more than you've seen, and I know. We're going to see that in a minute when we look at the movie Seven. So a lot of people thought, well, I don't understand why the Coen brothers put this as the ending. But I think it makes perfect sense when you think of the tragic plot in this way. So let's take a look.
How'd you sleep?
I don't know. Had dreams.
Anything interesting?
All right, then. Two of them. Both had my father in them. It's peculiar. Anyway, the first one I don't remember too well, but it was about meeting him in town somewhere, and he gave me some money. I think I lost it. The second one, it was like we was both back in the older times, and I was a horseback going through this pass in the mountains, snow on the ground. He rode past me and kept on going, never said nothing going by, just rode on past. When he rode past, I seen he was carrying fire in a horn, the way people used to do, and I could see the horn from the light inside of it, about the color of the moon. And in the dream, I knew that he was going on ahead. And he's fixing to make a fire somewhere out there, and all that dark, and all that cold. And I knew that whenever I got there, he'd be there. And then I woke up.
You can see why people would be surprised that was the ending to the film, right? But listen to, okay, so first of all, there's two dreams. The first dream is essentially a little recapitulation of the entire plot of No Country for Old Men. I didn't show you a lot of the clips, but if you watch the movie, Moss finds some money, and then the whole thing is that he can't keep the money. He finds it, he tries to escape, but Javier Bardem hunts him down, and he can't get away from him. So that's the first dream. Now, the second dream is that his father is going out into all that dark and all that cold, and he's going to be there waiting for him with a little bit of hope, a little bit of light, a little bit of fire. But that's just a dream. Because what does he say right at the end? Then I woke up. So there's always a juxtaposition, you'll notice, between the hope, the dream, and the real world. You know, you're going to find that again when we look at 7. Brad Pitt, the hope. Morgan Freeman, the real world. You know, the younger cop in No Country for Old Men, the hope. Yeah, we can solve this, maybe. You know, and then Tommy Lee Jones, the real world. Right. So there's this sense of the scene of Oedipus gouging out his eyes. Doesn't want to look anymore. He's weary of trying to escape this fate. That's the last scene here in No Country for Old Men, right? He's given up. He's tired. He feels overmatched. He's not going to try anymore. This is No Country for Old Men, right? And so the Coen brothers are kind of leaving it open. Well, is there any truth to that dream that somewhere out there in that dark and that cold, that there is some hope? Or is it like the world of Oedipus, where someone's in charge, the gods are in charge, fate's in charge, and you don't have any chance against them? You're going to do what they want to do. And the interesting thing about the Greek style of tragedy is that the fates, they don't have your best interest in mind. You know, you're sort of their puppet, their plaything. So then the question is, within that Greek style of tragedy, where you're just the plaything of the gods, where they don't necessarily have your best interest in mind, and there's no escape from that world, what do you do? Now, in the 20th century, there was kind of a recapitulation of that view. At the end of the 1900s, that was a time of incredible optimism. There was all of these inventions going on, the telegraph, the telephone, combustion engines, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this real sense in modernism and progress, science, et cetera, right? There was not this idea that the world will not let you escape. That, there was this idea that we can crack it open. We can use our brains and our technology, and we can cooperate together, and we can achieve, great things. We can have freedom. We're not going to be limited by disease and death and war and pestilence, right? However, the 20th century shattered those dreams with the 2 world wars. And out of the wake of those 2 devastating wars emerged the philosophy of existentialism. Albert Camus wrote The Myth of Sisyphus and Other Essays. That is a very influential metaphor for the filmmaking that then followed in the 60s, 70s, and on up to the 80s. And so the myth of Sisyphus is what? Sisyphus here is condemned by the gods to endlessly roll a rock up a hill, and then it rolls back down, and he rolls it up again. The idea of pointlessness. It's very similar to Moss trying to get this money. It's pointless. Javier Bardem's not going to let him do it. Tommy Lee Jones solving the crime. It's pointless, right? So there's a sense of just chasing after the wind, or Hebel, vapor, as in the book of Ecclesiastes. And so what was the conclusion that Albert Camus had at the end of the Myth of Sisyphus? He said, and this is his quote, "One must imagine Sisyphus happy. He made his rock his thing." So there's a sense of defiance, rebellion against the fates, against the gods, for hemming you in and condemning you to this fate. You can't do anything to get out of it, but you can be a tragic hero. This is where we get the notion of the tragic hero. Okay, so now let's take a look at 2 films, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and Thelma and Louise. Let's look at Thelma and Louise first. So if you remember, Thelma and Louise, they get away from they get out of town, and they break some laws, and they're trying to have freedom as 2 women that are sort of underneath this patriarchal system of control. this big vast conspiracy theory that society wants to keep them in their place and keep them down, right? And at the end, it's just the same as No Country for Old Men, just the same as Oedipus Rex, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, we're going to see in a second, where they keep getting hemmed in until finally they're trapped, and they're trapped against the rim of the Grand Canyon. And what do? So here's the last scene.
Yeah. Something else, all right.
God.
Oh, that's for us.
These women are armed, Hal. This is standard. Now fall down. These boys know what they're doing.
I repeat, turn your engine off and place your hands in plain view.
What are you doing?
I'm not giving up.
Cut your engine off and place your hands in plain view.
Okay, then listen. Let's not get caught.
What are you talking about?
Let's keep going.
What do you mean?
Go.
You sure?
Yeah. Hit it. Hey!
Okay, so what happened there? They said there's no way out. They're not going to let us escape. We've been trying the whole movie. So again, there's somebody controlling that world, that circle. They're caught. They're trapped inside that circle. And so what do? Well, there's a sense that they just punch through. They fly out into the Grand Canyon, and then we see this freeze frame by Ridley Scott. Now, Ridley Scott actually had an alternate ending, which he talked about in the DVD commentary for Thelma and Louise, which I was able to find here online. So now let's remember that ending and this ending, the flying ending, and now let's watch this alternate ending and look at the difference.
Okay, then listen. Let's not get caught.
What are you talking about?
Let's keep going.
What do you mean?
Go.
You sure?
Yeah. Hit it.
Okay, and so the alternate ending shows, of course, the car falling and falling and falling and falling. And what Ridley Scott said was, you don't really want to think about these two women as dying. You want to imagine them as that one little moment where they were free. One little moment. And that's what the tragic hero represents, is that one little moment of freedom, even though seconds later they died, And so this alternate ending does wind up with this flashback shot of them driving off into the sunset, But Ridley Scott ultimately said the freeze frame worked better because that's the point of the tragic hero. The Sisyphusian, Camusian, existentialist tragic hero is that they've somehow won a victory against the gods by this one act of defiance. Is that the same as Oedipus gouging out his eyes? Or is it saying, the modern tragic hero has won some kind of a victory rather than complete capitulation, like in the case of Oedipus? There's some sense of, we're going to just sort of go out in a blaze of glory, right? So that's kind of a theme that you see. Okay, so this ending versus this ending, right? This is the flying ending. This is the falling ending. This one's a little bit too depressing when you leave no way out. Okay, so now this is not an anomaly. Thelma and Louise is not an anomaly, especially in the 70s. So now let's take a look at Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Again, a very similar plot. They start out as robbers. They break the law, in some sense. They're running away from the rules of society, the conventions of society. And there's this kind of endearing quality to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. They're joking around, and they're kind of like, they're robbing the train that really the rich guy, the rich company that runs the train, they can afford it, and there's this kind of sense of, these rules, they're not really there for the right reasons. Like, we kind of want to live a fun life and rob banks, and kind of a Robin Hood-esque type of an idea. But then fate, that's the dream stage, and then fate starts to close in the frustration stage in the form of this posse. And somebody put together a montage here on YouTube of who are these guys? Who are these guys? This kind of sense of exasperation by Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. How can these guys keep coming? Well, I would say because they represent fate, just like Javier Bardem has the little tracker that tracks Moss to where the money is. So let's take a look now at this.
I couldn't do that. Could you do that? How can they do that? Who are those guys? Damn it! They're not going for it. Who are those guys? They're beginning to get on my nerves. Who are those guys?
Okay. Who are those guys? So there's a sense that those guys, the ones in charge of this circle that they can't escape, like the Fates and Oedipus Rex, are just relentless. And so what do? They go down to Bolivia. They think, well, let's just keep going. Just like Thelma and Louise, right at the end of the Grand Canyon. Come on, let's just keep going. And even when the keeping going is getting dangerous, more and more dangerous for these protagonists, Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid are jumping off of cliffs into the water and everything. So they finally wind up in Bolivia. And what do they say? They're still caught. They're still hemmed in. The Fates won't let them out. And what do they say? Let's go to Australia, right? So let's watch now the ending scene of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Australia.
That's your great idea. Australia's no better than here.
Oh, that's all you know.
Name me one thing.
They
Name me
speak
one
English
thing.
in Australia. Got horses in Australia. Hell, they got thousands of miles we could hide out in.
What about the banks?
Easy, ripe, and luscious.
It's a long way, though, isn't it?
Ah, everything's got to be perfect with you.
I just don't want to get there and find out it stinks. That's all. All right.
Hey, wait a minute.
What?
You didn't see LaFours out there, did you?
No.
For a moment there, I thought we were in trouble.
Okay, and so now we have this freeze frame at the end of the movie, just like we did in Thelma and Louise, right? So who are those guys? Who are those guys? Let's get away from them. Let's keep going. Let's go all the way down to Bolivia. When we're in Bolivia, well, maybe if we could just make it to Australia. And what does the Sundance Kid say? He says, well, Australia, that's not going to be any different than Bolivia or America. You know, we can't get out of this. We can't get out of this little circle, you know. And so what do? They have their tragic standoff at the end. So in this case, if you notice, the Greek style tragedy, the hero is usually not innocent. Obviously, Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid are not innocent. They're bank robbers, but they're treated with this sort of endearing way. They're not really treated as tragic figures like Walter White is in Breaking Bad, or some of these figures of, or you know, Othello or King Lear, or you know, the Shakespearean tragedies. So I think that's what distinguishes this from the Faustian style tragedy. Okay, but what does that remind you? What does that remind you of, right? The story of Jonah, right? In the story of Jonah, there's a prophecy, something that he has to do, some state of reality that he chafes against, that he doesn't like. And so what does he do? He tries to get away, just like Oedipus tries to get away. And what happens? He's brought back by some agent of fate, by Leviathan, by Tiamat, the fish of the sea. Won't allow him to escape to the ends of the world. He's trying to go to Tarshish. Now, in that world, as we transition from a Greek style of thinking into the Neoplatonic blend with Christianity in the Middle Ages, now we're going to start to get that Faustian sense of tragedy. And how is that different? That's really the main question here. Okay, so now let's look at one more example of the Oedipus style tragedy. Let's look at Chinatown. I just want to give you guys a couple examples so you don't think I'm just making all this stuff up. You're going to see the same themes. You're going to see a figure that represents fate, that controls the whole world, that locks in our protagonist, and then you're going to see this gradual rebuffing of hope until finally you're left with despair. Now, this is the famous story guru, Robert McKee, who wrote the story, the big book called Story, and advisor to countless screenplays in Hollywood for decades and decades, and has the famous story seminar, which was parodied in the movie adaptation. I happened to take his seminar a number of years ago, as well as his genre series, and he does a little bit on Chinatown here. So let's watch that.
Chinatown began as a screenplay by Robert Towne, based on true stories his father told him about a scandal involving the water supply to the city of Los Angeles. The script took years to write, as Towne did tremendous research, not only into the original chicanery and how it worked, but into the world of the private eye and the tricks of that trade. After many drafts and experiments, he finally decided to structure the film around a closed mystery, a whodunit, with more sex and politics than Agatha Christie, certainly, but with the ending she'd approve. At the climax of Towne's screenplay, Detective J.J. Gittes nails the murderer, and all live happily ever after. Paramount Pictures took an interest and showed the script to Roman Polanski, who was also intrigued, but he had one big problem. He didn't believe the ending. He couldn't buy the idea that a two-bit private eye could win out against such enormous political power. He agreed to direct only if the script was greatly rewritten, starting with changing the ending from happy to tragic. When they got Robert Towne down from the ceiling, he, desperate for a sale, agreed to collaborate. Now, Polanski himself's a writer of no small talent who's written or co-written all the films he's directed. By reworking Chinatown, a well-done but conventional thriller, he lifted it from good to great, making a radical, convention-breaking film that found popular and critical success and the undying affection of people who love film.
Now, what seems to be the problem?
My husband, I believe, is seeing another woman.
No, really?
I'm afraid so.
I am sorry.
Until Chinatown, the ironclad convention of all murder mystery was that the detective identifies, apprehends, and punishes the killer. But Polanski shattered that convention, paving the way for many fine films. Then, in a gentlemanly gesture, he took no screenwriting credit on the film that established Robert Towne's career. Of course, to this day, Towne will tell you Polanski ruined his screenplay, but a simple comparison of Towne's version to the shooting script, and it's clear that virtually everything that makes Chinatown a work of art is Polanski. Chinatown is set not at the turn of the century when the actual scam took place, but in the 30s for many reasons. Terrific-looking clothes, hairstyles, automobiles. It's hard for a private detective to make a quick getaway by jumping on the running board of a horse-drawn carriage. On the other hand, the Great Depression goes unnoticed. Now, Chinatown isn't history, it's anachronism. In commercial filmmaking, there's only one valid reason for setting a film in the past, and thereby adding at least 25% to the production budget, and that's to use the past as a clear glass through which to see the present. In the 70s, the United States was embroiled in the civil rights movement, Vietnam, Watergate. And as America woke up from the nightmare of just how corrupt a society it was, the time was ripe for Chinatown.
When you get so much publicity, you gotta get blasé about it. Let's face it, Jake, you're practically a movie star.
Some critics have called Chinatown film noir, but it's not. The heart of film noir is a femme fatale who inspires a tragic vulnerability in the tough guy protagonist. But Faye Dunaway's Mrs. Mulwray is a poignant, tragic figure herself. Film noir is concerned with fringe characters and losers. Here we have the rich, or people working for the rich. Film noir's lighting was hard, angular, expressionistic. Here the lighting is rich, almost romantic, which you'll see in its original cinemascope form.
How much would you like?
I'll stop it. The money's fine. It's generous. But, I think you shortchanged me on the story.
And the one thing the film noir private eye would never do, where those cynical gumshoes drew the line, they would not take matrimonial cases, meaning adultery. In Chinatown, J.J. Gittes boasts that adultery, as he mispronounces the French, is his métier. Now, if Polanski owes a debt, it's not to film noir, but Hitchcock. Like the great master, Polanski's taken a well-worn genre and made something both beautiful and meaningful, a film that sets itself apart uniquely from all other mystery thrillers, a film that is not only story, but poetry. And like any fine novel or play, a film becomes poetic by incorporating into itself an image system. This poetic system must be more than subtle. It must be subliminal. The audience is not to notice. The moment the audience reacts to an image as symbolic, the effect is destroyed. And I'm about to do just that by pointing out that Chinatown has not one, but 4 such poetic systems that weave throughout the film, enriching everything. The first is motifs of water versus drought. And so you'll see and hear constant allusions to drowning, to fish, drinking, beaches, lakes, reservoirs, steam irons, spit, the city's Department of Water and Power. In this film, water is power, and in the hands of a man named Noah.
You may think you know what you're dealing with, but believe me, you don't. Why is that funny?
It's what the district attorney used to tell me in Chinatown.
The second system is sexual cruelty. There's only one instance of loving sexuality in the film. All the rest cause suffering. Adultery, castration, sadism, incest, and horses. A lot of horses, the universal symbol of sexual irrationality.
Did you talk to him this morning?
No, I went riding rather early.
Looks like you went quite a distance.
Just riding bareback.
Third, blindness or seeing falsely. Photographs, cameras, windows, rearview mirrors, broken eyeglasses, binoculars, sunglasses, and eyes, especially the eyes of the dead.
Jake, what are you doing here?
Nothing, Morty. It's my lunch hour. I thought I'd drop by and see who dropped dead lately.
Yeah? Isn't this something? Middle of a drought and the water commissioner drowns. Only in L.A.
The film's title, Chinatown, has always intrigued audiences. It's the key to the 4th image system, political corruption as social cement. The wonderfully ironic notion that political corruption is actually the glue that holds society together.
I want to find out who put you up to it. I'll give you a few days to think about it. Call me, I can help. Who knows? Maybe we can put the whole thing off on a few big shots and you can stay the head of the department for the next 20 years.
In many of America's major cities, there's a Chinatown, and traditionally the police of New York, San Francisco, and Los Angeles have taken a singular attitude toward their Chinatowns, which is to allow crime to exist unimpeded so long as it doesn't spread outside that district and contaminate the rest of the city. In this film, Chinatown becomes a state of mind, a symbol for the whole of American society, a place where crime is allowed to exist. And so you'll see lots of Oriental characters. In the love scene, Faye Dunaway is given a very Chinese makeup. The film makes constant allusions to phony contracts, bribery, corruption. Not a single scene goes by that doesn't refrain on these four poetic schemes.
Tell me, you still putting Chinamen in jail for spitting in the laundry?
You're a little behind the times, Jake. They use steam irons now. And I'm out of Chinatown.
Since when?
Since I made lieutenant.
Congratulations.
I can't help but think that when this film was written, the world's oldest detective story, Oedipus Rex, was not far from mind. Both stories are set in cities suffering from drought. Both protagonists believe they're working for the public good in the future, when in fact they're driven by private, unconscious desires rooted in a dark past. Both stories involve incest and the murder of father figures. The fatal flaw of both heroes is excessive pride. Both assume that the crime was committed for conventional reasons, greed, power, but then discover the irrational, evil for its own blind sake.
I don't blame myself. See, Mr. Gitz, most people never have to face the fact that at the right time and the right place, they're capable of anything.
Okay, so that's a pretty good picture of the world of Chinatown, right? So again, you've got this one figure who is in charge of everything, and then the detective, the Oedipus Rex character, the No Country for Old Men detective character, or the Bonnie and Clyde type, the Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid type. They want to get out of this world. Now, sometimes in the case of the outlaw movies, it's kind of ambiguous as to whether that world is actually controlled by an evil genius, to put it into Cart's terms, by some kind of nefarious figure. But in this case, it definitely is. The world of Chinatown, the world of the Department of Water and Power in Los Angeles, all of that world is corrupt. And each story, if you'll notice, creates a world in which the protagonist lives, and they try to escape. So you don't necessarily have to have the entire cosmos controlled by some evil god. You can just have the world that the protagonist lives in is controlled by this person. The main, I think, thing to make it work is the power differential. John Huston's character is all powerful. For all intents and purposes, he is a god in that world. And the things that he wants to do and the things that he's able to do, Jack Nicholson is unable to stop it. There's just nothing he can do about it. So let's now watch that final scene, that famous final scene in Chinatown, and you'll really see this is the quintessential Oedipus-style tragedy.
She's never going to know that.
Evelyn, you're a disturbed woman. You cannot hope to provide.
Evelyn, put that gun away. Let the police handle this. He owns the police.
You'll have to kill me first.
Get away. Captain, close the door.
Captain, get an ambulance.
You want to do your partner a big favor? Take him home. Go home, Jake. I'm doing you a favor.
Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown.
All right, come on, clear the area.
off the street!
Okay, so Noah Cross, the person in charge, the figure that is all powerful, finally gets his way in the end. And what does the other detective say to Jack Nicholson's character J.J. Gittes? Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown. And now, little story behind that. Now, apparently Robert Townsend had written another line there, which was more on the nose, something along the lines of, forget it, Jake. There's no way you can win because everything's going to turn out badly no matter what you do. Something like that. And so they came up with, they buried it in the subtext, and It's Chinatown became sort of shorthand for that idea that you can't win against this all-powerful figure. Okay, so isn't that interesting? This all-powerful figure. Now, just in case you need more convincing that this is a common technique, let's take a look at one more movie. Let's look at the movie Seven. So Kevin Spacey plays the killer in that, sort of similar to No Country for Old Men. He plays John Doe, and then you've got, just like in No Country for Old Men, you've got your old, jaded, more realistic detective and your young, idealistic detective. And it's set up, again, like you might think this is an Overcoming the Monster story, but it's set up in this from the perspective of these two detectives. And every step along the way, they realize that someone is in charge. Someone has, in a sense, had this prophecy or spoke this prophecy over them and is now the puppet master and getting them to do whatever he wants. They're the ones that are locked into this world. So let's take a look at a scene from Seven.
Hey, how did you get like this?
It wasn't one thing, I can tell you that.
Go on.
I just don't think I can continue to live in a place that embraces apathy as if it was a virtue.
You know different. You know better.
I'm not. I sympathize completely. Apathy is a solution. It's easier to steal what you want than it is to earn it. Hell, love costs. It takes effort.
We are talking about people who are mentally ill. We are talking about...
No,
yes.
we're not. No.
Today.
We're talking about everyday life here. You can't afford to be this naive.
You should listen to yourself. You say that the problem with people is that they don't care. It makes no sense. You know why?
You care.
You want to know? Damn right.
And you're going to make a difference.
I don't think you're quitting because you believe these things you say. I think you want to believe them because you're quitting. I don't agree with you. I do not. I can't.
Okay, so now we've got your optimistic cop. You've got Brad Pitt. He thinks, you know what? We can solve this crime. We can get out of the circle. Just like Thelma and Louise thought they could escape the cops. And just like Butch Cassidy thought that he could get away and go to Australia, you know. So he thinks that there's a way out. And of course, Morgan Freeman knows better. He's world weary, just like Tommy Lee Jones. And meanwhile, the person behind the scenes, the person drawing this circle around them is the killer that they're chasing. So now let's look at the very end of Seven.
You've made quite a life for yourself, Detective.
California, stay away from here. Stay away from here now. Don't come in here. Whatever you hear, stay away. John Doe has the upper hand.
Mills! What?
I wish I could have lived like you did.
Shut up.
I'm trying to tell you how much I admire you. And your pretty wife.
Blow it away!
I took a souvenir.
What's going on over there?
Put the gun
I
down.
saw you with the box. What was in the box?
Because I envy your normal life.
Put the gun down, David.
It seems that envy is my sin.
No, what's in the box?
He just told you.
You lied!
He wants you to shoot him.
No!
You tell me that's not true. That's not true.
Become vengeance, David.
Tell me she's all right!
You made her a suspect, David.
No!
She begged for her life.
Shut up.
And for the life of the baby inside of her.
Ah!
He didn't know.
Give me the gun, David. If you kill him, he will win.
Oh, God! Oh!
Okay, so you can see all the dynamics there. So John Doe wants him to become Wrath. He's been following all of the seven deadly sins throughout the movie. You'll see all these different sins represented, and the final one is Wrath, and Brad Pitt was the one that John Doe had earmarked for that, and he basically, just like the Fates did with Oedipus Rex, engineered things in such a way that he did exactly what he wanted. So John Doe here is the puppet master, and Brad Pitt is the puppet. And Morgan Freeman, unfortunately, has to observe helplessly while it all goes down. But here's an interesting thing. Here's an interesting question. So with this Oedipus-style tragedy, again, there's a sense that the protagonist seems to be innocent. You know, there's this prophecy spoken over Oedipus when he's a baby. He hasn't had a chance to choose anything, right? There doesn't seem to be any choice at all in the Oedipus-style tragedy. You know, Brad Pitt, no matter what he does, John Doe is so powerful that he's going to wind up doing what Kevin Spacey wants him to do. Thelma and Louise are never going to get away. They're going to have to conform to the rules of society or die, basically. Bonnie and Clyde, same idea. No Country for Old Men, same idea. But, and this is also probably true in No Country for Old Men, the Faustian idea, the bargain with the devil, starts to creep in certain situations. And there we just saw it. You know, you could think of John Doe as fate, but there's another figure that he could possibly represent, and that is the Luciferian figure. Because why? He is offering him a choice. He's offering him not a way out of this world, because the person that he loves is already dead. That's what was in the box. So there's no way out of here, but what he does offer him is perhaps, and I might be able to find more clear examples of this in a minute, another world inside of this one that he controls. Maybe that's what the Faustian bargain is. The Faustian plot, there's a deal with the devil that's made, and then they get their own little circle inside of the bigger circle. So let's tease that idea out a little bit. So we got the Oedipus style over here. We got the Faustian style over here, the deal with the devil. All right. But there's a sense that these figures, Dorian Gray and Walter White in particular, they feel like Oedipus. They feel like J.J. Geddes. They feel like Thelma and Louise. They feel like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. But rather than dying, rather than driving off into the Grand Canyon, rather than just giving up and walking away, rather than going out in a blaze of glory, what do? They make a deal with the devil. And what does that do for them? Okay, so now let's take a look at Breaking Bad. So those of you familiar with the story, Walter White in the beginning of the show is, in a sense, like Oedipus Rex or like Thelma and Louise. You know, he's living inside of a system here that he chafes against. He doesn't like it. The whole pilot of Breaking Bad is all about these humiliating things that are happening to him while he's trying to live a good, virtuous life. And yet everything's going wrong and he's sort of trapped. He can't do what he wants to do. He can't fulfill the potential that he feels like he has. And he wants to get out. Okay. but there's no way out. That's the whole point of the very first episode. So let's watch a clip. This is the speech, the famous speech at the beginning in the pilot of Breaking Bad.
Chemistry is the study of matter, but I prefer to see it as the study of change. Now, just think about this. Molecules change their bonds. Huh? Well, that's all of life, right? I mean, it's the constant. It's the cycle. It's growth, then decay, then transformation. It is fascinating, really. Chad, is there something wrong with your table? Ionic bonds. Are you done? Ionic bonds, chapter 6.
Okay, so there we can see Walter White. He's teaching high school, and he's being humiliated. He's a brilliant man. We know that from the rest of the show, and yet here he is reduced to these high school students who have absolutely don't give a care in the world for what he's trying to teach them. And then later on, we see the very kid that was sort of dragging the chair is the one who he has to have a second job at a car wash, and the kid comes in and sees him cleaning his car.
Hey, Mr. White. Make those tires shine, huh?
Oh my God.
So there's humiliation after humiliation after humiliation, lack of potential being realized over and over and over for Walter White. And so along comes in that situation, when you're in that place where you feel trapped inside of that circle, that's when the deal with the devil comes along, right? That's when the temptation comes along. So let's take a look at that scene.
Sorry, you didn't see that. This was clearly an ongoing operation, well organized.
Hank, how much money is that?
It's about $700,000. It's a pretty good haul. Put this big a dent in the.
That's unusual, isn't it? That kind of cash?
It's easy money, till we catch you. You can watch us knock down a meth lab. Huh? Why don't you say the word, and I'll take you on a ride along. Get a little excitement in your life.
Yeah, someday.
Okay, so there it is. There's the temptation. Now, of course, later on in the episode, we're going to learn that Walter White has cancer, and so now he's also faced with his mortality. So all of these different things, the humiliation, the lack of potential, and mortality represent that border around this world and the increasing desire to escape from it, to transcend the limits that are placed upon his mortal life, we might say. Okay, that's when the devil offers this deal, this Faustian deal. If you are willing to break some rules, then maybe you can get out of this circle. And so after he learns of his cancer diagnosis, he goes on the ride along with Hank, and he sees Jesse Pinkman, his former student, and he realizes he's got an in to the meth world now, and he can maybe make some of that easy money, and he figures that he's smart enough not to get caught. So now we enter into the tragic spiral downward. This is the story of King Lear. This is the story of Othello. This is the Shakespearean style Faustian tragic plotline. Okay, so now here's the irony about the deal with the devil, is that he is given now, you might say by the devil, his own little circle inside of that larger circle. But he's in control of now that border. He has become the John Huston character in Chinatown. He has become the John Doe character in Seven. Now he's got this little world, but inside, this is the irony of it, inside that world is another little Oedipus, right? So Jesse Pinkman now becomes the one who reaps all of the misery at Walter White's puppet mastering skills, right? So now we've got a circle inside of a circle. So we've got a little Oedipus now inside this world that is created by the Faustian deal, right? So now let's take a look at Walter White as Heisenberg. Heisenberg now is the fate figure Heisenberg is the one who's in control, who has he's the Javier Bardem character from No Country for Old Men. He is now this tyrannical controller of life and death.
You dye your meth with food coloring to make it look like mine. But now, you have the opportunity to sell it yourself.
We're not going to give up this deal to be your errand boys. Do you understand me? To watch a bunch of junkies get a better high?
A better high, a higher purity, means a greater yield. Now you listen to me. You've got the greatest meth cook in America. No, the two greatest meth cooks in America. You'll earn more from that 35% than you ever would on your own. We have 40 pounds of product ready to ship. Are you ready?
Who the hell are you?
You all know exactly who I am. Say my name.
I don't have a damn clue who the hell you are.
Yeah, you do. I'm the man who killed Gus Fring.
Bullshit. Cartel got Fring.
You sure? Now, say my name.
Heisenberg.
You're goddamn right.
Okay, so say my name. You're Heisenberg, right? So he's now sort of establishing this border, and who's inside of it? Remember, he says you've got the best meth cook. No, the two best meth cooks in America. Well, Jesse earlier, if you watched the show, wanted to get out. He said, I want to get out. He wanted to get out of this circle that he was drawn into by Walter White. And he's not going to let him out. Now, watch this scene. The next scene, the bargain with the devil. Here we have a real good picture of how this figure that controls the circle will offer someone a little kingdom inside of his kingdom. So let's say Walter White's got the big circle. He's got the meth empire. And now he's offering Jesse his little part, his little kingdom inside of that bigger kingdom. So you can't escape, can't get out, but you can have your own kingdom within that system of control.
Look at you. What have you got in your life, huh? Nothing. Video games and go-karts. Oh, and when you get tired of that, what then? And how soon will you start using again? Look, I know how upset you are. I am just as upset as you are.
Really?
What, do I have to curl up in a ball in tears in front of you? What happened to that boy is a tragedy. But because it happened, what, am I supposed to just lie down and die with him? What Todd did, you and I have done things that are just as bad.
Yeah.
If you believe that there's a hell, I don't know if you're into that. We're already pretty much going there, right? But I'm not gonna lie down until I get there.
How many more people are gonna die because of us?
No one. Now that we're in control, no one else gets hurt.
You keep saying that, and it's bullshit every time. You just give me my money, and you and we're done.
Why do you want this money?
Because it's mine?
But isn't it filthy blood money? I mean, you're so pure, you have such emotional depth. I'll save you from that, Jesse. You want it just as much as I want it. And it's not wrong to want it. So stay and work with me, and you can make 10 times, 20 times as much.
You don't want to pay me? I don't care. It's on you.
I'm done. No, you're not. You're not done. Because if you leave, you get nothing. You understand me? Nothing! Jesse!
All right, Jesse, you get nothing unless you do what I say. So you can see now Walter White has made the transition from mild-mannered Walter White into Heisenberg. And who is Heisenberg in the world of this film? Well, I want to suggest that it's this figure. It's this Luciferian figure who has created a system of control within the larger system of control. So the only way out for Jesse is to have nothing, essentially death, or take the deal. That's the option. Now, if you notice, that's the same deal that you have in this story in the New Testament, right? It's either die, it's either take the deal, or die. Those are the, when you're trapped in one of these cycles of corruption, these cycles, a little system of control inside of the world. That's the only way out. That's the only way out of the world of Chinatown with John Huston's character. And so now you have. That's why I think Walter White represents that fate, that sense of fate, that fate character. He says whether or not Jesse can get out or not. Jesse cannot do anything without Walter White's consent. Same thing as all of the cops and everybody in Chinatown without John Huston's consent. So let's look at one other scene here. Just in case you aren't convinced that Walter White has now become fate for Jesse, who's trapped in that little circle, let's watch one more scene here.
Jesse! Stop what you're doing and turn and face me! You wanna know what he did? Jesse, he poisoned a little kid just as a move! Walt's a bastard. Secret's out. You see, I don't want to kill you. So put it out. You can't keep getting away with it! He can't keep getting away with it! He won't. You really want to burn him down? Let's do it together.
Where are we going now?
You know how this works. A good witness for me, it'll go better for you.
Yeah, sitting around in D.C., waiting to be a witness against Mr. White. It's gonna go great for me.
Okay, so he can't keep getting away with it. He can't keep getting away with it, but yet he does, right? And so in the end there, Hank says to Jesse, don't worry, we'll protect you. And he goes, oh, yeah, it's going to go really well for me, waiting to be a witness against Mr. White, right? Because he knows Mr. White will not allow him to be taken down by Jesse without Jesse's going to die. If the choice is between the two of them, Jesse's going to die. The whole show has been showing that whenever someone goes up against Mr. White, they die, right? And Jesse understands this. So Jesse, in a sense, is caught inside of the circle here. So Walter White took the deal with the devil, and then he gets his own circle, but now he's got his little Oedipus character inside of that circle. John Doe, presumably, you could say that John Doe took a deal with the devil before he constructed this circle of control that Brad Pitt finds himself caught in. And so now he represents fate within that world. Walter White represents fate within this world. And we can go on and on down these tragedies, and you can see this connection between the notion of the sense of fate or providence that doesn't have your best interest in mind, right? So there, you can think of providence as, the normal sense of providence is that things work out for your good, that there's someone looking out for you, that you have a guardian angel. That's sort of the right side up version of this. The upside down version of this is that there's some devil or some Lucifer figure or some satanic figure or some god, lowercase g, some Greek god, who wants to keep you in their clutches of control. And so there's this connection between the Oedipus style tragedy and the Faustian tragedy now, because you can see that the consequence of taking this deal locks you into here. And then the only option you have now is to control someone else within your little circle. So you could say that in the end of 7 that we just watched, the end of 7, Kevin Spacey's character, John Doe, really is offering Brad Pitt a deal. He wants him to kill him because he wants him to become wrath. And so presumably you could say that Brad Pitt is being offered that temptation from the devil at the end of the movie to create his own little circle of control within the larger one. He can't change the larger reality. The larger reality is that John Doe has already killed the person that he loves. He's already killed the woman he loves. And so he can't change that. So the only thing he can do is one level down. He can escape it by going one level down. And so that's what happens. And presumably, if you were to then see his life in, let's say, a sequel to this, he would be the one with this system of control. And he would be the one that represents fate to whoever's trapped inside of his web. Something like that. I think that's kind of how the logic of it works out. So each person's got their own little Oedipus inside of their system of control. Okay, so let's take a step back and wrap this up here. So I think what I've been trying to argue is that those two forms of tragedy are really two aspects of one larger story. And basically, the Oedipus-style tragedy involves someone already trapped in this system of control, and the fate, the person that represents fate, we don't really see their backstory. They're just the ones in charge, and they're the ones who don't. They're the devil figure. They're the Luciferian figure. They're the figure of fate, of negative providence, you might say. But the Faustian one, it's as if the Faustian one, it takes a step back and shows you how this person came to be in rulership over this Oedipus figure. So how the god-like figure in the story became what they became. And it was by the vehicle of this deal with the devil, where they were given a kingdom, and now the consequences of that is that the only really option is to tyrannically control those underneath them. So I think that's kind of how it fits together. So when you think about Greek mythology, there's the story, of course, you probably all know this, the story of Uranos and Kronos, and what happens with Uranos and Kronos. Uranos is the first king. It's the Greek word for sky. It's where we get the word for the planet Uranus, and basically Kronos, the sun, plots with his mother Gaia to castrate his own father. So think of that dynamic as going from below towards above. That's how you get on top, is by castrating your own father. And then, of course, Kronos, what does he do? He realizes now that he's on top, that if he has any children, that they are going to try to do the same thing to him. So he eats his babies. He eats his children. And famously, Zeus escapes his clutches, and Zeus winds up doing the same thing to him. So he can't escape the fate either. But that's kind of like the idea that in order to, if you kill the king, then someone's going to come and kill you. That's kind of the idea. So why is that relevant? Because in the next lecture, we're going to be talking about the rebirth plot. And the rebirth plot adds in a little deviation from the path right between Acts 4 and 5, which is the way to stop a tragedy from continuing. Stop that cycle of downward cycles of control and control and control. Circles inside of circles inside of circles. And it's done with the David story. So in the David story, rather than killing Saul, rather than castrating, he just cuts off a hem of his garment. So these two stories are kind of interacting. These two ancient stories are kind of interacting. And the idea is that in order to get out of this system of control and not continue that cycle of circles inside of circles, that there has to be a refusal to play the game, you might say, like a refusal to continue that cycle and take the deal with the devil, which says, all you got to do is kill the king and then you can be king, something like that. So that's what we're going to look at next time. So that'll be the rebirth plot. We still have comedy to do. That'll probably take a while for me to do, but I'm almost done with the rebirth plot. So I think that that will be coming out soon. Hopefully this was interesting. This lecture was actually a lot harder for me. Tragedy was a lot harder for me to figure out than some of these other plots, possibly just because it has such a long and rich history. So please, leave a comment. Let me know what you think, and thanks for watching. And check back later, and we'll be talking about rebirth next. Okay, bye.